Hi, everyone. Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com. And I am back once again with Raphael from Radiant Reality. Hi, Raphael. Thank you for being
Hey,
here.
thanks
And
for
to,
having me.
you're so welcome. And today we're actually continuing our series on tarot and astrology, where we're covering the entire major arcana in the tarot and going through each card and talking about not just the tarot symbolism, but its connection to the astrological symbolism. And today we're covering the judgment card, which I'm super excited to learn more about. And if you guys want to see the entire series on astrology and tarot, you have to make sure that you subscribe to both of our channels because we're doing it on both. And so the final video in our series is going to be on the world card, and that's going to be over on Raphael's channel. The link is down in the description. You definitely want to subscribe to his channel either way because he does really incredible forecasts. He does numerology. He does so many wonderful things, and he's always freaky accurate. And so you can find that down below. But yeah, let's get into the judgment card.
So here we go. This is another one of those cards in the tarot. When people see it, I think a lot of people, because it kind of looks quite ominous, right? You got dead
Yeah,
bodies being dragged
it's
up.
like the apocalypse.
You're right. It can be a little ominous when you see it, but the real beauty for me in the Judgment card, it literally marks the end of an era. So whenever you see the Judgment card, you know big changes on the horizon for you. And there's a few ways that we can look at this. So to break down the symbolism, the fact that you've got the bodies kind of rising up there out of their graves, this is in the old tarot decks, they used to call it the Last Judgment. And it's actually kind of like from a biblical reference. So this guy here is meant to be the Archangel Gabriel blowing the trumpet and summoning up all the dead to become whatever. What I've kind of understood that as for me personally and what it means for people on the ground on it, because how do you use that, right? It's it usually shows up as like a deep blast from the past. The Judgment card, because it represents that really powerful change, the only real way that we can ever really move forward in life is by really understanding where we've been, and more importantly being totally ready to release everything that we've been in a past iteration of who we are. So that for me is kind of like that energy of the Last Judgment or the removal of something. This card has so many deep meanings. We're talking about rebirth, we're talking about karma, we're talking about change. Very often with this card as well, you'll get like a really deep exploration or excavation of something to do with you on a personal level. Sometimes, and I've seen this card represent like really deep insights that people have about their past in some way. And very often, like I said, it always accompanies some kind of big change. And for that reason, especially like we're talking about with the raising up of, well, not the raising of the dead, but certainly dredging things up, you tend to see this a lot when someone has like a really powerful blast from the past, somebody that they haven't seen for years. It could be like an old partner, it can be like an old friend, somebody they went to school with. Or sometimes it will be someone that's had like a really profound effect on your life in some way. So it's like you meet that person, you see them again, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, when I met them, this was the person that triggered me going to university and really changed my life in some way. The other thing with this card, so when you see the angel there blowing the trumpet and calling up the bodies, the way that I kind of see this is like an internal call to action, because the Judgment card is such a spiritual card. It really is. In fact, this card, coupled with, let's say, like the High Priestess, usually speaks to people that are mediums, people that have those sort of deep connections to the other world. Very often, the High Priestess and the Judgment card will also speak to ancestor worship and practice. And this card itself can really speak to our deep sort of ancestry. So I really love this card because it always suggests that there's big change coming. Not always easy, right? As we're getting as a theme with a lot of the later cards. But yeah, it has that kind of deep revelation feeling to it. And when you think about Judgment and like the end times and all of those things, they all have one thing in common: the end of an era. So the Judgment card is kind of like that massive clearing of the decks where it's like, okay, I know this is coming to an end. I know huge change is taking place now. I'm being called to action to kind of say, okay, what comes next, right? One thing that I do find interesting with this card, some people and tarot readers have ascribed it to Chiron as well as Pluto, which is really interesting to me. So in the Chiron, like the Chironic kind of aspect, to just start making up words now, for me, it kind of speaks to that. If I release this old wound, then I can move forward. Then I'm truly able to step into that new era, but only when you pass that test. And that really is the Judgment card. Like, I've seen it also represent trials that people go through where it's like, okay, in order to move forward, these new beliefs or this new way of living my life is being tested.
Interesting. I find
Just
that
all of that
fascinating.
to Pluto.
Yeah. So I find that really fascinating because in like karmic or evolutionary astrology, which isn't something that I've studied very heavily, but I do know that Pluto is super important because it represents like a deep traumatic experience that's being carried over like unconsciously, subconsciously on this deep level from a previous lifetime. And so it's almost like that symbolism of what you're saying, like it's like the dead being raised up, and then this is something that you have to work on, work through, and move past in this lifetime. And even without that past life association, Pluto, of course, is associated with like depth. It is associated with deep, like psychological issues. It is associated with psychology in general, and it is associated with traumatic experiences and also transformative experiences that transform you from your core, from the inside out. And when you talk about this like inner like kind of motivation almost, it's like that's a Pluto energy because we have Mars, which is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, and Mars is physical action, right? It's your physical like need to take action based on your will. Pluto is actually this like psychological action or this psychic action that we take. It's like a psychic power that lies within us that we can harness and tap into. It's like a driving force that's not just external, it's something that's much deeper. And energetically, it has implications where it's almost like that energy of that need to transform or that need to do something that comes from this deeper level forces things to sort of happen around you energetically. It's like, you know, when that Pluto energy is activated, the seas part and the stars align and everybody gets out of your way that needs to get out of your way. And the right people are just like sucked in like a magnet to you. And so it is this really powerful energy. But yeah, I don't know if that has an association with the
Yeah, no, I love that.
judgment
And
card.
I'm actually in my mind, I'm like, so how do we tap into Pluto? How, if I know this is kind of a side topic, but
Mm-hmm.
how would we tap into that? How would you utilize that Pluto, maybe either in your chart or as a transit?
So, well, as a transit, that's when it's like, especially if it's transiting your ascendant by conjunction or trine, or your sun or your moon, that's when you have that like psychic power. But so it's kind of like you'll feel it like on a visceral level. I have this natally on my ascendant. So I kind of understand this a little bit better where you can't just make whatever you think you want to have happen. It doesn't work that way. It has to be aligned with like at your deepest core, your deepest truth, you know, this is something that it's just you need to do it. It needs to happen. You want it so badly. And it's not because your brain wants it because the TV tells you you need to be a millionaire or this person tells you need to be that. It's
Yeah.
something deeper. And if it's not that, you can't make it happen. It doesn't work that way. And so with those Pluto transits, you'll get in touch with your deepest and truest desires, and you'll be able to pull that in. And where Pluto is in your chart, that will be an area where you'll have the ability to do that, especially if Pluto's more supported as opposed to like being squared by Saturn or something. So looking at your Pluto placement in your chart, what house it's in, sign obviously is important, and what planets it's connected to can tell a story of like where you have that manifestation ability, so long as you're connected and tapped into your desires.
Wow. I'm going to be unpacking that one for a long time. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay. Yeah, you know, it's funny because when you say that, like when I talk about this being that call to action, it would literally be coming from soul level or
Okay. Yeah.
spirit level, or even like an ancestral whisper in your ear that pulls you forward to say, this is what you need to do, or maybe even shines a light on a specific part of the path. The interesting thing with this card as well, especially when it comes up with like certain other cards, it can actually speak to NDEs. I've seen this come up a lot for people that have had like near-death experiences and stuff. And it tends to have that sort of otherworldly connection to it. I like what you said about the transformation as well, because it really is that. It's like you can transform or you can stay the same, but you won't get to that next level, which is what you meet in the world card, unless you fulfill whatever that kind of trial is, I guess. Wow. Okay. Past deeds and mishaps revealed is what you find with the judgment card as well. Again, obviously attending cards would really clarify that. But is that something that you find with Pluto as well?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's connected to our past experiences in this lifetime and apparently in previous lifetimes too. And kind of, it is a revelatory energy. It's kind of like these parts of yourself that are really deep are being revealed through these experiences. And one of the things with Pluto is that it is a deep healing planet too. And so it's kind of like these past deeds and these past experiences. It's like the Chiron energy that you describe. You don't need Chiron for that, to like add that layer into there, because Pluto already has that. It's one of the deepest healing planets where it goes to the core issue and it heals you from the inside out. It's very regenerative. And so it's also an energy of purging and
Oh,
releasing,
yes.
physically, psychologically, all of it. And so it sounds like the judgment card has that kind of energy as well.
Yeah, especially with you know, like when you have the need to do like cord cutting or anything like that,
Mhm.
that's judgment card stuff. It reveals something to you to say, look, this is the thing or the connection or the person or whatever that's holding you back. And until you kind of acknowledge that, you won't, like, it's like seeing, and I describe this to some of my clients, it's like, you know, you've got your nose pressed up against the glass and you're like, I want to be in there. That's the judgment card. And it says, well, you can go in there, no problem. I'll give you the keys, but this is what you have to release or let go of first, or even address.
Yeah. And like with Pluto, that can be like a kind of a dark night of the soul sort of energy where you have to go through these trials and face a lot of stuff that you don't want to face that can get kind of dark.
Yeah. I'm just really thinking of my own Pluto and where it is in my chart. I'm like, yeah, all of the above, tick, tick, tick. Great. Do you have anything to add or to ask about the judgment card?
I'm actually wondering about the numerology side of it.
Okay, so the numerology is an interesting one. This, so it is the number 20. And so what you see with the number 2 is obviously connections, but the 2 in tarot literally represents the high priestess. So there's that link to the spirituality.
Mm.
And anytime that we're looking at the 0, what you're taking is the number, but it's elevated to its next stage. It's elevated to a higher level of itself. And the reason we say that is because the 0 energy we've seen before in the Fool. And even though it is kind of like a new or a Neshan energy, it is also the energy of pure potential. So this is kind of like that 2, that high priestess, that spiritual energy taken to another level that gives it kind of a almost like a further reach. So it goes from being sort of just personal to being something that's a lot more macrocosmic. And because you're tapped into it through that spirituality, you then get bigger or deeper glimpses into it. The number 2 as well as an energy, it is a more yin energy, it's a more negative energy, and it's because it's always seeking to balance out the equation. So with 2 energy, you really do, and especially when it's amplified, this is about really addressing or readdressing the balances or the imbalances that might be present at any given moment. What I really like about that as well is we see the number 2 repeated out throughout the tarot in the high priestess, but also in the Justice card.
Mhm.
So when you look at these, like they are, they're both feminine energies, but one is like the masculine principle of the feminine. That's the Justice card, which is, very overt and about the law. And then you've got the High Priestess, which is a lot more sort of yin, a lot more feminine, a lot softer and more intuitive and imaginative. So this kind of takes all of that and blends the two, if you like.
Okay. And so would this, because it's tied to the Justice card and all these other things, would this be kind of almost like a reap what you've sown sort of energy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If it comes up through the Judgment card, especially like, so you could typify this, I guess, like if it came up with the Six of Cups, it's like, yay, this is great memories, this is good stuff from the past. Whereas if it came up with, say, the Devil, some move that you made, some choice that you made is now coming back to haunt you. And it's like, you have to get this in order to be released from it. And, the lighter side of the Devil card when it shows up is you can free yourself from that. You just got to face it like, head on or balance out the equation. So, yeah, absolutely. You can see this a lot for karma and reaping your past rewards.
All right. Interesting. So I do have to ask, I know we covered this a little bit as we went through, but if somebody pulls the Judgment card, what are kind of the main things that you would say or that it would signify for them?
Depending on obviously what was around, blast from the past, absolutely. Big change, call to action. Those three tend to be like the main sort of themes. But again, rebirth, change, especially like sometimes if this card shows up, depending on like if the client is at a crossroads, you'll see it in this because when it comes up, it's like the universe is basically sat there going, are you going to say anything? Are you going to do anything? It's like, this is your moment to do something. Change is going to happen, but you have to initiate it.
Amazing. Okay. Well, that is super cool. Yeah, we have a lot of really good information out of this. So is there anything else that you want to add to the Judgment card before we sign off?
No, that's a good one. I mean, I guess I want to ask about, it's a bit morbid, but Pluto's tied to, like, I know it's tied to the underworld, but what's the whole thing with death?
So Saturn actually traditionally rules death. But since Pluto's discovery, I think 1931 was it or 1930? Since Pluto's discovery, which is not that long ago, not even 100 years ago, astrologers have noticed that there is this tie to death, not just through its namesake, because you can't just get a planet that's like newly discovered and like that's its name and then that's all of its symbolism. I mean, of course everything is connected as above so below, but you have to kind of watch what it's doing. I mean, these other planets got their significations through observing, like observational study over thousands of years. And so we've had what less like 92 years, yeah, with Pluto-ish. But they have noticed this, and I've noticed this too, where there is an association with death, there is an association with things that are darker, that are harder to deal with, or that are more taboo, or that people are afraid to address or are afraid to look at. And death absolutely is the number one thing in our society that people are afraid of, that they don't want to look at. And so that Pluto energy is more of a psychological component tied to death as opposed to the physical component, which would be more Saturnian, like Saturn is death, but Pluto actually rules like decomposition. So like things like compost, that energy of like, yeah, death, but also like what happens after death. Like the body returns to the earth, it decomposes, and then it springs new life. And so that's more of the Pluto version of it versus the Saturnian. So it's more the psychological and almost philosophical components of death.
Yeah, love that. And it actually speaks a lot more to regeneration, I think, as well. Just that, rather than just like death and that's it, it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
really love that. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm super excited for the next video, which is the final one in this series that we've been working on since 2020.
It's like the longest project ever, but it's been great. It really has.
Yeah, I've been really loving this and I'm super excited for the next video. You guys subscribe to Raphael's channel if you want to watch it. And thank you guys so much for being here. Subscribe to my channel too if you want, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone.
Bye.